I'm R.A. Schwartz, along with my co-host tonight, Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the WNBAinsidr Show. Each week we cover different topics important to the W, using X's and O's along with key stats to bring honest and critical analysis. We're titling this one, Sweep? Sweep question mark? Rachel, we're 2 games into the WNBA Finals. Game 1, just to recap for the fans, just total domination. Seattle just everything right, and Washington looked shook by the moment. Game 2, very intense battle, and we've talked about this off air. I'll talk about it on air. I feel more so DC handed the win to Seattle. We saw it in last series where Sue kind of had to put the team on her back and bring the team to the next level. In this game, I think DC just flat out lost the game. Rachel, do you want to recap? Do you want to add anything to the recaps of the first 2 games?
Well, I think you pretty much nailed everything on the head. I will kind of make a couple comments about Game 2. I mean, I think if you are the Washington Mystics and you're headed back home, it's Game 3. It's do or die at this point. You've as much as it hurts, and as much as the first 2 games obviously were not the way they were hoping they would go. I think if you're DC, you have to feel pretty good and maybe a sort of confidence, if you will, on knowing what you're capable of doing. One, you've beaten Seattle before, and you didn't just beat them lightly. I mean, you've dominated Seattle. You kept the game as close as you were able to in Game 2, and you were as bad as you've been all season from the 3-point line. I mean, who in their right mind would have ever imagined that a team that really, relies so heavily on their 3-point shooting ability, who would have ever expected them to go 0 for 16? And you go right down the line. I mean, Deladon goes 0 for, Ariel Atkins 0 for 3, Christy Tolliver 0 for 6. I mean, that was. It doesn't get any worse than that in terms of just not being able to even see the ball go through the net and beyond the arc. And so I think the fact that it was as close as it was able to come down to the wire the way it did, the things they did better defensively throughout the course of that game, and was a true battle back and forth. I mean, if you're Washington, you get a couple of those to fall, and you get a couple more calls that I know people were kind of questioning the calls, especially down the stretch with Tolliver. It's a completely different outcome. So I think Washington, we're going to see them obviously at home. They're going to have an opportunity in front of their own fans. Well,
hopefully the fans can make it.
If the fans can make it, we'll get to that here in a little bit, and I'm sure they will. But I think we're going to see a Washington team playing with some confidence and understanding of like, hey, we're going to go get this thing. I don't think it's going to be a sweep.
So I just, adding a few things to that, I'd say the keys in Game 2, and you hit it right on the head there. The Mystics, they live and die by the 3. They weren't able to hit the 3 at all, but yet somehow to keep it that close is a huge moral victory. Moral victories don't get you diddly in the pros, so it doesn't really mean much. But looking at a few things, 1, offensive rebounds, 11-6. Seattle dominated that, and we saw it at times too in Game 1, and we saw it be so key in Game 5 against the Mercury for Seattle, where offensive rebounds at key times really not only change the pace of the game, but can be so deflating. I mean, I don't know if there's anything as deflating. I guess like a Sue Bird half court jumping over a player at 3-pointer is also really deflating. But an offensive rebound, after you play a good set of defense, you can shut down the high-octane offense of the Seattle Storm is just super deflating. You brought up one more thing that I want to get into about Game 2, the calls. Now, obviously, there was questionable calls coming from the referees, but now I don't know if this is calls or execution, but it has to be brought up. That last play by Washington, Christy Tolliver has the ball, and we saw this at a point in the Atlanta series where it just – and I've seen this a couple times, honestly, throughout the season with Washington. I've been at most of their games and watched the majority of their games as well. There's just times where late in the games, Coach T, I don't know if the play constantly breaks down or what, but this happens many times where it's just kind of get Christy the ball, everyone's standing around, she gets maybe one pick, the pick sets or doesn't, and it's just like, all right, everyone stand around, let Christy do something. And to me, Christy Tolliver, great player, no disrespect to her, you're not the star of the team. Elena Deladon is. You're in the WNBA Finals. You have the game on the line. You're down by a point or two, and you have the opportunity to tie or take the win. Now, 3-point hasn't been dropping, so I respect that you tried to take it to the paint, but you got to get Delle Donne a touch. She has to touch the ball. I don't care if it's a decoy. She has to touch the ball in that last play. Rachel, your thoughts?
I think that's what they were trying to do. I think that was what was talked about, and I think that was the plan, was to get Delle Donne the ball on the block. Now, I've watched it a couple times. I've tried to analyze it. Obviously, I'm not in the huddles. I'm not sure what the call was, but there's no need to go for the three at that point. Obviously, that wasn't the call, especially with the way they'd been shooting it. So the call was to get the ball to Delle Donne on the block and for her to get that touch and to go to work and do what she does. But the play broke down. They were unable to do it. And ultimately, she wasn't open. They weren't able to get her the ball. So credit to Seattle's defense, or if you want to criticize, the play call, whatever it was, I think that's what they were trying to do. But it breaks down, and then at that point, Tolliver, who again, she had made some pretty clutch shots down the stretch, so I don't think it's too outlandish to, obviously be disappointed with the ball in her hands in that scenario. She's a veteran. She's come through so many times in that standpoint, but it was completely broken down, and that's what it was. It was a broken play. And it was a broken play that was actually fouled on, and that the proper call was not made, and we all know what happens after that. So I'm with you. I agree. I think for me the bigger question mark is just the fourth quarter as a whole. Delle Donne gets one shot attempt that entire fourth quarter, which to me is a little more shocking than, say, just a broken play down the stretch. I think, and someone posed this question to me on Twitter when I made that comment. It was, well, is that a credit to Seattle's defense, or is that a knock on Delle Donne? Was she not being as active? Is that on Seattle, their play calling, whatever? I think it's probably a little combination of everything. I just don't think you've got that caliber of player on your team. The ball's got to be in her hands, and you've got to kind of live and die with her down the stretch. She's got to get more than one shot attempt in that fourth quarter, and I don't think there's probably anyone in the world that would disagree with me. But to me, that was the more shocking stat. Once I saw it, of man, that fourth quarter was really difficult, and on top of that, there were a couple really critical turnovers down the stretch for Washington in that fourth quarter that really shot them in the foot. Now, for the game, they did a really good job of taking care of it. They finished the game with only 7, which is great. If they keep taking care of the basketball that way for a
yeah, but Rachel, they had 2 or 0 going into the fourth quarter. They had, 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter is almost
right.
Did the moment get to them?
I don't know. It definitely.
Well, and, yeah.
you have to put together a full 40 minutes, whether or not your shots are falling or not. They could go 0 for 16 again tomorrow night or tonight, for those of you who are listening to it, and put together a different series of events defensively, taking care of the basketball, and it's a different outcome. So this game was not completely lost on the 3 ball. You're right. That fourth quarter and those turnovers were detrimental. And like you said, completely shot him in the foot.
All right, moving on to game 3, and we're going to do this brief because I think it's simple at this point, honestly. For Seattle, I'll make it crystal clear. Don't get lost in the moment. Don't get, if you have jitters, you shove that deep down, hide it somewhere inside of you and forget about it. And you focus on doing what you've done all year. For DC, it's also pretty simple. You talked about it. And, get Elena Delle Donne the ball. She's your star. She should be taking more shots. I don't care if you're forcing it up. Now, something I tweeted out that I want fans to pay attention to is, and honestly, it was an interview with Sue Bird talking about Brianna Stewart telling her to get her legs behind it and really get a little bit more oomph in her shot. And I started to look back at Delle Donne's 3-point shots from this game, and then I looked back at her before the injury and just her up and her motion, and it looks like she doesn't have her full range of motion. I don't know, if maybe she was tired, maybe she was saving it for something else. There's a billion things that could go into it. Her 3-point motion just looked off, and it looked to be stemming from the legs. So that's something that's going to be key because she's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, and if you're shooting 0 for 16 and Chrissy Tolliver is going through a cold streak, you kind of often throughout the season have relied on Deladon. So I think the keys are get Deladon the ball. Even if you put her in a spot and you say Deladon, force up the shot, I don't think that's the worst call at certain points, just to get her touches. And then you can get that offensive rebound from Sanders, who's been great with that all season long, and that can be deflating against Seattle. I think DC really needs to get into the mental aspect of this game and kind of psych them out. But it's going to come down to hustle points, I think, in Game 3.
I think for me, I agree with you on Seattle. You keep doing what you're doing. It's not like they're necessarily playing like, Game 2, they were not like gangbusters out there just killing people. Sue Bird had a rough shooting night. There were different parts, different areas of the game where they struggled at times. They finished with 15 turnovers. And so, but they've been steady and they've been able to kind of withstand runs that have been thrown their way. For Washington, I think the mentality is going to be there. They've got to come out aggressive. They've got to come out with that we've got to punch first mentality. They got to see the ball go through the net early on. So those first few possessions, coming out, not playing on your heels, really being the aggressor, really taking it at them. You got to hope that you can get yourself to the free throw line. Winning the free throw battle is going to be so clutch in this game on Wednesday night, because this game ultimately, if it's coming down to the wire like this, they've got to get there more. So they've got to be aggressive offensively in terms of where they're getting the ball, aggressive when they're crashing offensive glass like you talked about, rebounding. They cannot give Seattle that many offensive rebounds or second chance opportunities. It's tough enough as it is to slow them down, and you put together a great string of consecutive defensive stops, and then to give up an board, it's completely deflating. So being able to come up with consecutive stops, being the aggressor, really taking it at them, make Seattle guard you, make them make plays, get yourself to the free throw line. You've got to win the free throw battle. Shots are going to fall. Shots are going to fall for Washington. I genuinely feel that way. And they've got to continue to take care of the basketball the way they have been, like they did in Game 2, but you can't have a meltdown in the fourth quarter with 5 turnovers or whatever the stat may be unofficially. But I think Washington's going to be in a right frame of mind. I think they're going to come out the aggressor. I think they're going to do everything that they need to do. And ultimately, I think they're going to win this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. First of all, I want to make one comment, because I feel anytime we've been talking about Washington, just based off her play, she needs a shout out to Atkins, just balling out amazing, carrying this team.
He's tremendous.
Oh yeah, and I just feel like the way she's played, whether or not they're able to pull off a victory or even get one win in this series, she deserves all the credit in the world. And also, I'm just going to say this: if somehow DC pulls off this win, unless something ridiculous happens, I'm voting Atkins for Finals MVP. Just putting it there. But back to the predictions. You think that's too crazy?
No, not at all. Why not?
All right.
It's been great.
Yeah. Moving on to predictions. I'm torn, Rachel, and the reason I'm torn is because when we started this series, I said Storm sweep, or it goes to 5, and Storm lose in 5. Because I think if it goes to 5, as ridiculous as it sounds, for the Storm to be at home and lose the Game 5, I think that mental aspect would really doom them. But now I'm second guessing myself, because I agree with you. In the moment right now, I believe DC is going to pull off the victory in Game 3 at Eagle Bank Arena. But I think Seattle pulls off the Game 4. That's just what I'm feeling right now. So I'm going to agree with you. But I think DC is going to pull off like a 10-point or a 9-point win tomorrow or today, depending on when you're listening to it. Is that too wild?
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be a pretty convincing victory by Washington. And I don't mean I just think they're going to be flowing a little more offensively. They're going to be playing a little more confident. They're going to be offensively kind of that Washington team that we have seen them be. I'm not saying they're going to go hang 100, but they might be up there. They might break 90 in terms of just kind of what they're able to do, at least up in the 80s. If they can get it up to 85, I think they'll win this game.
I agree with you. Hey, this has been the WNBA Insider Show with my amazing co-host, Rachel Galligan. I'm R.A. Schwartz. Each week, each episode, different important topics to the WNBA.